Good morning, students. So, let us continue with the topic, that is social effect. Before that, let us connect to the social inequality as we had already started the topic. So, what were the reasons which gave rise to social inequality? First of all, the rich difference between the capitalist and the worker class. The huge gulf between the capitalists, who were the rich people who owned the factories, and worker class who worked in the factories, and workers used to get very minimum wages from the capitalists. Hence there was a huge difference between capitalists and the worker class. This gave rise to the socialism, that is socialist group, who started to revolt against these capitalists. Hence now this gave rise to the social effect, which was the economic disparity, the huge difference between the rich capitalists and the poor worker class, who led to the gross social inequalities. So, total inequalities was the main burden, main cause was the difference between the capitalists and the worker class. So there was a wide gulf between the social status between both the capitalists and the workers. So this led to harsh living conditions of the workers. The industrial revolution led to the migration of people from villages to the industrial towns in search of job. Now there was huge population pressure over the urban areas. Now where these poor worker class were settled, who had their no home in these towns, rich towns, urban towns. So cities grow rapidly without any proper planning. As the population grew, the cities became overcrowded and people were forced to live in the crowded homes in squalid surroundings means very compact surroundings, where it was very you can tell the ventilation was also very bad, and people used to breathe in an environment which was very chaos, full of pollution. So it was crowded with the homes in a very bad environment without proper sanitation facilities. A large number of slums grew up. Black smoke filled the air in the absence of basic amenities. The health of workers broke down. So, black smoke, that means the smoke from the factories which were coming out, it also polluted the environment. Plus, the health of the workers broke down rapidly, who were working whole day in these factories, who were in those those polluted environments. So it took the heavy toll of life of the people who were working in industrial areas. Disease and epidemics spread. According to a report, a slum in Manchester, all the inhabitants had died. In Manchester, a slum was there that not even a single inhabitant of that slum had survived due to cholera epidemic in the early years of 1930s. A pathetic condition it was. So exploitation of the workers, the capitalists. At what grounds? The workers were exploited. The capitalists amassed enormous wealth of expense on the expense of the workers. The workers who were working day and night on their basis only, they gained enormous wealth. The majority of whom were totally dependent on the employers. The workers had no job security. They could be dismissed anytime. But any time they can be dismissed or thrown out of the job. Now they worked on very low wages and under extreme harsh condition. As we all know that they worked day and night in the factories with such a polluted environment, huge pollution, which took heavy toll of life of the workers. So the capitalists exploited the workers by forcing them to work for almost 16 hours a day with very minimum wages without any break. They were not allowed to go on strike also. The women and children were employed in large numbers in deep and dangerous coal mines. They worked from dawn to dusk and thus on extremely low wages. No compensation was paid to the workers for injury or death due to the accident in mines and factories. That means there was no security of their life also. If they died, there was no say. No one knows that when they died, where they died, and how they died. That means if any type of death was done due to any accident in mines and factories, there was no compensation for them. The extremely stressful working and living condition led to a decline of the moral values. The people started to think very harsh, very adamant among the worker class. They became very rough in their language, in their approach, in their behavior. Life became a struggle for survival and community bonds broke down. People started to behave like animals, especially these worker class. The dacoities, the robbery, these all had started in those times. So political effect was also there. These are certain effects. Now political effects was what? So rise of the capitalist. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, landowners enjoyed great wealth, privileges, and political influence. The Industrial Revolution led to the emergence of wealthy and powerful capitalist class. Underline it. This type of questions comes in fill in the blanks also. Industrial Revolution led to the emergence of wealthy and powerful capitalist class as a dominant force in the British Parliament. Government policies were influenced by the interest of the capitalist class. Similarly, trade union activities also started. In this, the ruthless exploitation, the exploitation of the worker class by the capitalists led to the protests. They united and organized themselves into trade unions to fight for their right and better working conditions. The ruthless exploitation of the workers by the capitalists led to protest. It was obvious, was continuous protest, continuous obstruction in their life. Hence, it led to the protest only. Protest from whom? Protest from worker class. So they united and organized themselves into trade unions, groups they made, unions, to fight for their right and better working conditions. So the trade union faced strong resistance from the employer side. In many countries, the clash between the trade unions and capitalists led to bloodshed. Many people were killed also. The struggle of the trade unions was long and arduous. The vast majority of workers did not have right to vote also, as they have migrated from different places, villages and all. So they were not having right to vote. They were not getting their position. They were not getting their power, their strength, and what they should be known for. So determination effort of the trade unions eventually bore fruit. It gave certain result. Their adamant behavior of the trade unions, their protest, their revolt, their reformation gave a result. What was it? The government passed several factory laws. Now in this, what happened? It was to improve the condition of the workers and grant them certain rights. What rights? The rise of imperialism. Imperialism is a policy of extending a country's power and influence to other countries through the use of military force, colonization of other means. It generally refers to the policy of takeover and domination of the political, economic, and cultural life of a weak overseas nation by a powerful nation. I am repeating the lines. So, the imperialism is what? Imperialism means a policy of a country to extend its power and influence to other countries. That means, for example, Britishers, what they were doing, what policies they were following? They were following their imperialist policy, expansion policy in different parts of the world. Here in England, they were doing industrial revolution, and from where they were getting raw materials? They were getting raw materials from those colonies which they have captured all over the world, like suppose for example Africa, for example India. There were different regions where they have traded, and they had traded and then invaded, and then those areas were used as a production of raw materials with low cost or no cost. Raw materials was they are getting from those captured colonies either with low cost or with no cost. That was not to say that what was the cost amount. Actual amount was never given to the colonies which were invaded by them. It was under their command, it was under their wish only it was run. So those raw materials were used in the production of the products in the factories in England. So imperialism is a policy of extending a country's power and influence to other countries through the use of military force, colonization or other means. It generally refers to the policy of takeover and domination of the political, economic and the cultural life of weak overseas nation by a powerful nation. Imperialism implies colonialism, which is the method of practice by which a powerful country acquires control over another country. Yes, imperialism is what? It is a policy of the colonialism. Under colonialism, what was having? It was a policy under which it was the powerful country which was acquiring the control over another country, either partly or wholly. The whole part of the country was taken, either partly, some part, or the whole part. It depends on the power of the invasion. And the revolt, how was the revolt done? So in 18th and the 19th century, the power, position and prestige of imperial European nations depended on the extent and values of their overseas positions. Now what does this line mean? In 18th and 19th century, the power, the position and prestige of the European class people, the European nations, dependent on only the extension and value of their colonies which they had captured all over the world. So here Europeans also started to expand themselves in different regions of the world by capturing the colonies. So industrial revolution sparked off a mad scramble of colonies in Asia and Africa. In Asia and Africa, these European powers were targeting to capture maximum of the colonies. So industrial development dependent on raw materials. Yes, it is very sure. And with ready markets, they require markets also to sell these products. So colonies could be exploited to serve as a constant source of raw materials for industrial production, exclusive captive markets for finished products to be sold, and these colonies could also be used as the field for investment of surplus British capital. If suppose surplus capital they are gaining, if they want to establish any industry, so these colony areas only they can establish the industries, so they can invest their surplus capital here also. So by the end of 19th century, the imperialist nations of Europe had colonized almost the whole of Asia and Africa. Almost whole of Asia and Africa had gone under the hands of the Europeans. So the scramble for colonies led to intense rivalry, fierce competition and numerous wars among the imperial powers. The Europeans, the British, these all people were all fighting among themselves for the capturing of the imperial powers among these nations of Asia and Africa. So these conflicts eventually precipitated international pressure and tension, and crisis also it created, which became one of the major cause for the starting of the First World War. I am repeating that the major cause for the starting of the First World War was the competition, the rivalry to capture maximum of the colonies among Asian and African countries, and it was done by the Europeans and the other rival powers. So this was the main scramble for race, scramble for capturing of maximum colonial areas, scramble for capturing of maximum labor force. It was the scramble for capturing of maximum weapon powers. So these were the actual pressure and tension which was going on among the rivalries. Imperial powers who wanted to have their imperialist power established maximum on these regions of Asian Africa. So this provided a huge international pressure and tension among these powers, which led to the First World War. So in the 19th century, the British had started an aggressive policy of conquering territories in India also. So this need to acquire and expand territorial possessions in India was actually fueled by the desperate need to sustain the rapid industrialization growth in Britain. Now I am repeating this line again. Listen carefully. The need to acquire and expand territorial position in India was why? What was the reason why they wanted to expand the territorial position in India? First of all, they wanted to fuel the desperate need. They wanted to give fuel to the industries which were running in England from the raw materials achieved from India. Hence, this need to was the expanding of the territory's position in India, which was used to fuel. It was used as a fuel for the industries which were running in England, to sustain and the rapid growth of those industries. By the middle of the 19th century, thus the British had conquered almost all part of India, and India became a jewel in the British crown, and Britain was transformed into an international economic giant because of the help of the raw materials which it was getting from India. So thus the Industrial Revolution set in motion the multiple forces of imperialism in the modern world, in the race for supremacy, and in the race for competition, in the race for greediness. So Britain surged ahead and emerged as the clear winner and creator of the largest and the most powerful empire in the world. And what was that empire? Empire on which the sun never sets. That means the power was expanding and expanding and expanding among the British powers. So in India, the British Empire would unleash potent forces of change in political dynamics. Economic equations. In India, the British Empire would unleash potent forces of change. They started to change the political dynamics. They started to mold the kings and the queens. The way of administration was being changed. The way of politics was being changed according to British monopoly. So economic equations were also changing. Special treaties were signed with the kings, and cultural influences had brought new languages were coming. The Christian language, the Christian religion, English language had entered, Western language had entered, and thus cultural influences started enslave a great nation. Enslaving slave marketing has started with the glorious legacy, and reduce it to just a colonial economy. What economy? The economy which was achieved from the Indian colony for almost of 200 years. So this was the end of imperialism. The imperialist powers, here in your chapter they are showing that this was the end part of the imperialism. Till how much you have to study is till end, and from here I will give you certain questions which you will do in your worksheet and study material, and then we'll go for the back exercise questions are there, we'll do that also. So follow the video class and then follow the study material and worksheets. Okay students, thank you.